From amongst the annals of Roman history, there are few tales more memorable than that of the great Carthaginian general Hannibal, crossing the Alps into Italy in 218 BC, bringing with him several war elephants which had been brought to Europe from North Africa. Hannibal had traveled with his army from Carthage's colonial possessions in what is now Spain, all the way through southern France, and finally over the great mountain range, possibly passing near the Matterhorn and into northern Italy. His goal was to conquer the city of Rome and bring the Roman Republic, which had risen to rule much of Italy in recent years, to its knees. This was a goal that Hannibal very nearly succeeded in, winning a stunning military victory over the Romans at the Battle of Cannae in August 216 BC. But thereafter, his campaign faltered, and when the war between Rome and Carthage eventually ended 15 years later, Rome was completely victorious and Carthage was reduced to a shell of a power. So the question is, why did Hannibal fail to conquer Rome, given the favorable circumstances which were obtained after the Battle of Cannae in 216 BC? Before assessing this question in detail, it is necessary to examine what the wider geopolitical circumstances were. The city of Carthage had been settled as a colony of the Phoenicians of the northeast of what is now the country of Tunisia, where the city of Tunis lies today. According to tradition, the city was settled at about 800 BC. This was shortly before the traditional date of the establishment of the city of Rome in central Italy in 753 BC. Both city-states were negligible powers for centuries, as the main centers of power in the Mediterranean lay to the east in Greece, Turkey, and the many islands of the Aegean. However, beginning in the 4th century BC, both states began to expand aggressively. The Roman Republic started to conquer many other city-states in central Italy, and with victory in the Second Samnite War in 304 BC, extended its rule to the southern parts of the Italian peninsula. By that time, Carthage had expanded its own presence throughout much of North Africa and had also conquered much of the island of Sicily. Consequently, the Roman Republic and Carthage were now neighbors in southern Italy, and conflict was increasingly likely between the two powers who were rivals for control of the western Mediterranean. War eventually came in 264 BC. The First Punic War between Rome and Carthage would last 23 years, but when it ended in 241 BC, Carthaginian influence was removed from Sicily, and Rome had established itself as the ruler of virtually the entirety of the island other than the city of Syracuse. Carthage was now weakened, but not defeated, and in the 230s and 220s, a Carthaginian general called Hamilcar Barca began conquering much of the southern parts of the Iberian Peninsula for Carthage, a region then known as Hispania, with the goal of using that region's resources as an aid in building up Carthage's army and once again challenging Rome at some future date. This strategy was extremely successful, and Hamilcar's conquests included extensive silver mines in Hispania which enriched Carthage's war coffers. He was aided in the 220s by his sons, Hasdrubal and Hannibal, the latter of whom succeeded Hamilcar as viceroy of Carthage's Iberian territories in 221 BC. The immediate cause of the outbreak of the Second Punic War between Carthage and Rome was a dispute over the independent city of Saguntum in the east of the Iberian Peninsula near modern-day Valencia. This city lay just north of Carthage's Iberian territories, and Rome had signed a treaty with the city in the late 220s, which protected its sovereignty as a means of preventing any further Carthaginian expansion along the Iberian coast. Accordingly, when Hannibal ignored this treaty and attacked and captured Saguntum in 219 BC, the Roman Republic declared war on Carthage in the spring of 218 BC. War had commenced, but Hannibal was better prepared than Rome had expected, and he had a daring plan. The Romans had planned on a naval campaign against Carthage itself in North Africa as a way of winning a quick victory in the war. All of the signs were that this would prove successful, and indeed they had quickly captured the island of Malta from Carthage in the opening weeks of the war. However, already by that time, Hannibal was on his way north from northeastern Hispania, across the Pyrenees and through southern France towards the Alps. Ancient accounts depict his forces as numbering upwards of 100,000 men, but modern estimates suggest a smaller figure of somewhere between 30,000 and 40,000 men, and a small contingent of war elephants. The main benefit of the latter would be to use as a form of psychological warfare, the Roman armies being unfamiliar with the giant animals. Agreements were reached with several Gallic tribes to allow safe passage along the way, but other peoples attacked Hannibal and his men. Nevertheless, despite the hostile response and the difficulties of the weather and terrain in crossing the Alps, Hannibal and his army made it safely through northern Italy in the late autumn of 218 BC. His arrival in northern Italy caught the Romans completely by surprise. They had expected that any attack would be launched by sea against southern or central Italy. Consequently, they were poorly prepared for a northern invasion, and Hannibal quickly won a number of significant victories in 217 BC. As a result, many of Rome's allies and client states in northern and central Italy began abandoning Rome and allied with Carthage, strengthening Hannibal's hand as he campaigned further south. In Rome, panic now set in, and they elected Quintus Fabius Maximus as an interim dictator to have military powers and lead the war effort. All of the Republic's resources were mobilized to bring tens and thousands of troops into the field, but even so, Fabius delayed a direct engagement with Hannibal. As a result, 2 new consuls were elected in 216 BC to lead the war effort, and they quickly proceeded to meet Hannibal's forces in the field. It was a poor decision, and at the Battle of Cannae in the 2nd of August, 216 BC, a force of some 86,000 Roman and allied troops were encircled by Hannibal's numerically inferior army and largely obliterated. Only about 15,000 men escaped. The city of Rome itself was now badly exposed, and many of the Republic's most significant allies, such as the city of Capua and Port Tarentum, deserted it and allied with Carthage. The Macedonian king to the east, Philip V, even pledged his support to Hannibal. The course of war seemed inevitable following Cannae, but would not play out that way for a number of reasons. Eventually, Rome managed to survive and eventually defeat Carthage by adopting many of Carthaginians' own methods and turning them against them. Firstly, they began trying to turn some of Carthage's own allies and neighbors against it in much the same way as Hannibal had done with his cities such as Capua in Italy. For instance, from the start of the war, Rome was undermining Carthage's hold of southern Hispania by allying with several city-states which Carthage had conquered or reduced to vassalage there in the 230s and 220s. Similarly, in North Africa from 213 BC, Rome allied with a Numidian king named Syphax and sent military advisors to train his men to make war on neighboring Carthage. Finally, to counter the entry of Macedon into the war on Carthage's side, the Roman Republic allied with the Aetolian League in the mid-210s BC, a large coalition of city-states in northern Greece. The Romans copied the Carthaginian strategy in a second way by taking the war to Carthage in their own territories. Even as Hannibal was campaigning through Italy itself, Roman fleets were carrying Roman legions to southern Hispania. Here, they managed to obtain a large foothold in the region of modern-day Catalonia between the river Ebro and the Pyrenees. This not only troubled the Carthaginian hold on southern Hispania, but also blocked the Carthaginian route north towards the Alps that Hannibal had taken in 218 BC. Thus, when his brother Hasdrubal was ordered to bring a new army over the Alps into Italy in 215 BC to reinforce Hannibal for a final push to take Rome itself, he was prevented from doing so by the Roman presence in Iberia. This strategy of striking at Carthage would eventually prove successful that in 209 BC, the capital of Carthaginian power in Hispania, New Carthage, was seized by the Romans, and with a victory at the Battle of Ilipa in 206 BC, the Romans effectively conquered Carthage's territories in southern Iberia. This all profoundly weakened Hannibal's efforts to strike a fatal blow in Italy itself. Yet, these strategic developments were only so effective, and the ultimate reason why Hannibal failed to defeat Rome, despite spending 15 years campaigning in Italy between 218 BC and 203 BC, was owing to differences in the nature of Roman and Carthaginian war machines. By the late 3rd century, BC Rome had a large manpower base to draw on, both in the city of Rome and in terms of its Italian allies, than did Carthage. Accordingly, many of Hannibal and Hasdrubal's men in Italy, Hispania, and other fronts of the war were Iberian, Numidian, and Gallic mercenaries who were poorly trained and not as committed to the cause as the Roman citizens which made up the Roman legions. Moreover, despite the disaster of Cannae in 216 BC, the Roman legions were widely recognized as the foremost fighting force in the western Mediterranean by the time of the war, whose fighting formations and discipline were unrivaled. Additionally, the Roman navy had greater resources available to it than that of the Carthaginians, most notably an abundance of wood, which Tunisia was lacking in. All of this was cemented by the War of Attrition which developed in Italy between 215 BC and 203 BC. Roman generals like Claudius Marcellus largely aimed after the disastrous defeat of Cannae to avoid meeting Hannibal head-on and instead aimed to neutralize his fighting ability so he could not strike a decisive blow in Italy, while other Roman generals such as Publius Scipio struck brutal blows against Carthage and Hispania. This strategy worked, and by 204 BC, Scipio was in a position to launch an invasion of Carthaginian territory itself in North Africa. As a consequence, in 203 BC, Hannibal was forced to pull his men out of Italy and sail for North Africa. The Romans had not defeated him in Italy over a 15-year period, but by undermining his position by striking at Carthage's weaker points in Hispania and elsewhere, he was finally forced to withdraw. By the time he arrived in North Africa, peace negotiations between two governments were already at an advanced stage, but at the last minute, the Carthaginian government, placing its faith in Hannibal's brilliant abilities as a general, decided to recommence the conflict in North Africa. It was a fateful mistake, and at the Battle of Zama in 202 BC, Hannibal was finally defeated in the field by Scipio's Roman army. The following year, Carthage agreed to a catastrophic peace treaty whereby it renounced any claim to overseas territory and agreed not to engage in any further wars of expansion. Hannibal became a politician at Carthage, but when Romans began to suspect that he intended to revive the city-state's power in the mid-190s BC, he was forced into exile. He spent the remaining 15 or so years of his life serving as a general for various powers in the eastern Mediterranean and in the Middle East, such as the Seleucid Empire centered on Syria and the Levant. His failure to conquer Rome many years early ultimately proved fatal for Carthage. In 149 BC, Rome initiated a brief Third Punic War in which it annexed the city-state to its growing empire, which by then covered much of the Mediterranean. In conclusion, Hannibal failed to capture the city of Rome and defeat the Roman Republic for Carthage during the Second Punic War for a number of reasons. First and foremost, the Romans began to emulate Hannibal's own strategy of striking directly against Rome's core lands in Italy when they began to attack Carthage's large territories in the south and east of the Iberian Peninsula. This was absolutely vital in the short run, as the Roman incursion into the region along the east coast of Hispania in 217 BC and 216 BC prevented Hasdrubal, Hannibal's brother, from traveling over the Alps with a second Carthaginian army into Italy in 215 BC. Had he not been prevented from doing this, his arrival might have made it possible for Hannibal to follow up on his victory in Cannae in 216 BC and seize the city of Rome itself. Secondly, the Romans were able to offset Carthage's growing number of allies in Italy and elsewhere in the Mediterranean, such as King Philip V of Macedon and the major Italian city of Capua, by courting and acquiring their own allies, such as the Aetolian League in Greece and Syphax of Numidia in North Africa. But while all these measures were ultimately responsible for preventing Hannibal from overwhelming Rome in the early years of the war, it was the superiority of the Roman war machine and the Republic's legions which was the most telling factor in the end in producing Roman victory in 201 BC and the ultimate reason why Hannibal failed to conquer Rome.